योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिं गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम्. So last time we started with Bhava Pratyaya, we covered Upaya Pratyaya, and then we looked at Tivra Samveganam Asannaha and the sutra that comes after that. So if you look right from the beginning, initially the fundamental entities, Purusha, Chitta, and their relationship was defined and elaborated. Then we looked at the fivefold Chitta Vrittis. Then we looked at Vritti Nirodha and Abhyasa and Vairagya in quite some detail. Right? Then we looked at Samadhi, and there is the twofold yoga, Sampragnata Yoga and Asampragnata Yoga. We looked at both of them in quite some detail, where we saw that the Paravairagya was a means to the Asampragnata Yoga, which is sort of the pinnacle of attainment that we have seen so far. So having talked about the Asampragnata Yoga and sort of scaled the height, scaled the peak, we started thinking about how does one get there, right? And there were two things established. One was Bhava Pratyaya, and Bhava Pratyaya applies to the so-called celestial beings, the Videhas and the Prakritileyas. We saw what that means, but in general that is not something that will apply to human beings or yogis or won't apply to us. Then we looked at the Upaya Pratyaya. Now in Upaya Pratyaya, there is a whole progression and a whole set of constituents, which is Shraddha, Virya, Smriti, Samadhi, Prajna, and so on. We saw what each of those are. And the set of things, it was said, can lead a yogi to the Asampragnata Yoga state. Then the next two sutras, right, the Tivra Samveganam Asannaha and Vyasa's commentary along with that, told us that this is not a very easy path. Right? It said among the yogis there is a threefold classification based on the Upaya and Samvega. And each of those has three further subdivisions. So there are 9. And out of the 9, the last 3, only for them, you could say that this Asampragnata state is close at hand. Okay? And to sort of drive in the point even further, the next sutra says, even among those, that set, right? I mean the highest among those. So in the 9, the highest, the 9th stage, even that can be further subdivided into 3. Right? Mridu, Madhya, Adimatra, Tatopa Vishesha. So it can be specialized further, and then you can say it is close at hand, closer at hand, and closest at hand. Right? And we stopped at this point. So here came the realization that this path is not necessarily a short one. Right? That needs a lot of abhyasa, vairagya, the samskaras to be set up and everything in place. And still it is a long journey. There is a whole hierarchy of yogis. And that is being driven home through 2 sutras that clearly explains what are the classifications. And in the end, we ended up with 11. So the first 9 and the threefold of the last, the highest of those. So there were 11 kind of categories. And then for the highest, among the 11, it is closest at hand. Right? So we stopped at that point, and then Vyasa asks a very interesting question, which we saw last time also. So let's start with that. So the question is, Kim etasmad eva asannatamaha. Okay, is it through this only that it is closest at hand? So basically, the initial description, let's say, has left the reader with a certain awe that how it looks so difficult, looks such a long path. Kim etasmad eva asannatamaha. For what? Samadhir bhavati atha asya labhe. So the phala was always samadhi labha and the samadhi phala. So for this samadhi, is this the only way that it becomes close at hand? Right? Anyaha api kaschid upayaha. So is there any other way? Right? So this sort of tells us that having looked at the long path, somebody is awestruck and says, oh, this is such a long path. Is there any other way? Right? Anyaha kaschid upayaha nava iti. So that is the question. And
yeah, so we'll be soon embarking upon Ishvara Pranidhan Sutra. But before that, we were dealing with upaya and samvega, the means and intensities. See, usually we give importance to intensities. We want to do anything intensely if we are doing intently, diligently, mindfully, with a priority. So when there is a priority for us to do something, we consider the intensities. And we want to be doing ideally, as far as possible, as much as intensely as possible. That's what is the idealism in us. And therefore we tend to overlook, neglect. At another aspect which is very important is the means. So we must consider the means and intensities both, and not just consider intensities. Because the graduation will not take place by mere intensities. You will not graduate, you will not reach the goal by mere intensities. The means are very important. And suppose I adhere, the means are mentioned in 3 classes: mild, middle, intense. The intensities are again mild, middle, intense. So we might not really understand the 2 factors to be considered, because both have common grades, degrees: mild, middle, intense. Both for means as well as for intensities. Considering means is very important. Suppose you are on a very mrudu means. Say for instance, if I take study of Radiant Reader number 1 for my English, or Bala Bharati number 1 for my English, and I study intensely 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 hours a day, and then I put in even 8, 10 years in Bala Bharati number 1, high intensities, it will not give me graduation, because the means don't qualify me to graduate beyond a level. I must go to Bala Bharati 2, I must go to Radiant Reader number 2, number 3, number 4, if I have to evolve my English. I just can't take recourse to Bala Bharati number 1 and study intently 12 years, one tapas. Indians are familiar with this concept, doing it something for 12 years. And 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 hours a day. The means are not capable of lifting me beyond a level in my English. Is that right? So we have to consider at the right point in time to the means which are applied. The means must be also graduated. Means must go up from standard 1 to standard 2 to standard 3 to standard 4. From primary to middle to higher secondary to undergraduation to graduation to post-graduation. So these are the hierarchies. So the upaya must also be given consideration, and not merely intensities. So whatever you are doing, don't just go on increasing the intensities thinking that you will graduate. At right point in time, you have to understand that the means must be changed. I should read Radiant Reader at the most for 1 year. Bal Bharti, ideally for 1 year, not more than that. If I am doing Bal Bharti for 2 years and 3 years, it means that I have been failing in that standard. However sincerely and dedicatedly and intensely I might be working, the fact is that I have been failing in that standard, and therefore I am repeating it for 2nd year, 3rd year, 4th year. Therefore, the consideration of means is very important. At right point in time, we must also change our means, graduate our means. From mild means, we have to go to middle means, and from middle means we have to go to intense means as well. And each of the means, there will be again intensities. So try to understand this in combination, the gradations of means and gradations of intensities. Don't be obsessionally going for just upgradation of the intensities. That will not give you the graduation, that will not give you evolution. You will not go to the next step and stage, provided you consider the means. So in yoga, try to understand which are the various means. The means of a beginner. It might be difficult for a beginner to be doing that yoga, yet those are mild means. A beginner might find it difficult to tackle with the beginner's lessons. Classes might be difficult. But however, the means are mild. And therefore, bear this in mind. In yoga, try to identify which are the means, which are the levels, which are the hierarchies, and not merely go on working hard and harder and harder and harder and harder. That will not take you to the goals. Merely working hard is not the message that the wise people give us. We have to consider the means as well. So Vyasa has brought this to our notice, and he says the sutra is considering both. That's the implication. Mrudu Madhya Adhimatra Upaya and Mrudu Madhya Adhimatra Samvega. In yoga, what is Samvega? In other endeavors, your intensity depends upon your passion. Say any other fields of academics or sports or any other endeavor, you must be passionate. If you are not passionate, you will not have intensities. Okay? And that's why we take proud in saying that I'm very passionate about this. The people who are exalted in professions, or stood outstanding in professions, they say, this is my passion. And we give lots of accolades to them. We praise them. You must have passion to be doing it. Whatever. Sports, academics, any art pursuits, you must have passion, otherwise you don't progress. That's about worldly mundane aspects. Yoga is transcendent spiritual aspect. In yoga, you need to have not passion, but dispassion. You must do yoga dispassionately. You must pursue music passionately. You must pursue art passionately. You must pursue academics passionately. You must pursue sports passionately. You must pursue yoga impassionately, dispassionately. It's a unique realm. That's why it is spiritual subject. So Samvega here means dispassion, means vairagya. Now many times practically, if you go into it, if you recall in my classes, I have said, you must commence it passionately. Your yoga should commence passionately, should not continue passionately. Your session of practice should commence passionately, should not continue passionately. Passion is a kickstarter. In yoga, passion is kickstarter. So, kickstarting is a passion. Get kickstarted for your session of practice. But yoga has such a culture, soon it will envelop you with dispassion, thirstlessness. So bear this in mind. But otherwise, if you start with passion, continue with passion, your session of yoga, you are on a wrong track. Because means of yoga is vairagya. Means of vairagya, yoga is thirstlessness. And therefore samvega literally should not be taken here. The technical meaning of samvega is vairagya. Bear this in mind. And yoga has such a process that the more you go into it, the more dispassionate you will become. So you can take credit in yoga by saying, I am dispassionately in pursuit of yoga. Rather than elsewhere, you claim, you get credits. If you say, I am passionately pursuing my music, my art, my vocation, my job, my profession, sports, whatever, academics, samvega is vairagya. Tivra samvega is tivra vairagya. The more vairagya, more dispassion you have, the more probability to have progression in yoga. What is this vairagya? We have seen in Vairagya Sutra. Drushtanushravika vishay vitrushtansya vashikara sabnya vairagyam. Vairagya for the seen and unseen, heard and unheard objects, gross or subtle. So that is samvega. And upaya, what is the upaya? Tatra sthito yatnaha abhyasaha. All the means to be calm the mind, steady the mind are upayas. Steady the mind, steady the chitta, quieten the chitta, pacify the chitta are the upayas. So we must adhere to the means whereby our mind will become placid progressively. The mind will become progressively docile. The mind will gradually get insulated to pain, pleasure, delusions, which the worldly objects give us. So upaya is abhyasa aspect. And samvega is vairagya aspect. We have to upgrade the upaya aspect, which is abhyasa aspects. I will not take too long a time, but just I will tell you, even yamas and niyamas, ahimsa, satya, asteya, there are various channels to practice the yama niyamas. It can be a moral ethical practice. Patanjali is not suggesting yamas and niyamas, ahimsa and satya as moral ethical practices. Bear this in mind. Note this. Because some of them, we can practice yama niyamas, ahimsa satyadi as a virtue, practice of virtue. Will over matter, whatever will come, I will be adhering to morality, ethicality. That is moral ethical, practicing moral ethical principles. Or somebody might practice those as idealism. This is ideal and therefore I am going to adhere to yamas. I am going to adhere to ahimsa satyadi as idealism, as practice of virtue, as exercise to my psyche, exercise to my passion locus. To be taking measures against the tendencies of the flesh, the tendencies of the mind, etc. You can say, as a discipline, I am practicing ahimsa satya. So that's an exercise to will, volition, mind stuff, resoluteness, or it can be just practice of virtue, practice of idealism, it can be exercise, or it can be also sometimes remedies. Suppose your organ loses a tone, a digestive organ loses a tone, then you decide, I must not eat heavy things. I must take recourse to very light food. Because you find remedy in curbing the tendency for certain food. And that's why you take a measure. I will not eat this. I will not get angry, because if I get angry, my blood pressure goes up. So I am going to control my anger just because I have often experienced blood pressure shooting up, my eyes getting red, and then my discomfort in my brain. Therefore I am going to practice non-anger. So it is a remedy. Not getting angry can be a remedy. Not getting angry can be an exercise. Or not getting angry can be a virtue. Patanjali is mentioning these. Ahimsadi should be practiced in particular way, in a particular kind of framework, that it will give you quiet mind, serene mind. Usually in business of life we try to practice ahimsa, and we really don't torment others, but we ourselves get tormented 10 times by our non-tormented state. You speak the truth for you to get a status, or for you to people recognize that you practice truth. But you having spoken truth, you have a lot of agitation, tumult within your mind. You suffer because of your truth, because of your speaking truth. Lot of tumult, because lot of revolt. I should not have spoken, but yet I spoke. But I wanted to speak, therefore I spoke. Then a lot of infights are going on. Battle goes on within. I lost so many things because I spoke the truth. If I had taken recourse to untruth, I would not have lost. So we have a lot of tumult within us when we practice ahimsa. That's not suggested in yoga. That kind of ahimsa, that degree of ahimsa, that process of ahimsa, which will keep your mind quiet and serene, rather than giving security to others, rather than giving wellness and goodness to others. I can practice ahimsa so that you feel comfortable around me, you feel safe around me, you feel secure around me. That's not why Patanjali suggests, he doesn't suggest ahimsa to be practiced for that purpose. He suggests ahimsa to be practiced as upaya. So it is a particular kind of process, particular degree of it. What is the point in trying to practice that degree of satya which you yourself cannot assimilate? You get indigested by swallowing such a satya, by swallowing such a truthfulness. You yourself get indigested. What's the point in eating it? It's not right to eat it. Can you digest it? So if these principles are to be consumed, can you digest? Can you put up? And can you be comfortable? Not just put up, you should be comfortable. Having eaten, you should be comfortable. Putting up, you can understand the meaning of it. I am able to put up means we have a problem. And yet you are putting up with it. So, upaya, ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha, shaucha, santosha, tapas, swadhyaya, ishvara, pranidhana, asan, pranayam, pratyahara, dharana, dhyan, samadhi. These should be all upayas. Therefore, Patanjali introduces ethico-religious principles, and Ashtanga comes in the scheme, not moral ethical principles for ahimsa, satya, etc. And then physical health, well-being, exercises for asanas, etc. And pranayam for mental well-being and nervous well-being, etc. Nothing of that sort. It should be all upayas. Should give you steadiness to mind, the calm, serene, quiet conditions to mind. All ahimsa will not give you that. All satya will not give you that. Patanjali refers to that ahimsa, that satya, in such process, in such degree, in such dosage, that it will give you quiet mind. Do you understand? Those are the means. Entire Ashtanga Yoga scheme identify the means. On the other hand, Ashtanga Yoga scheme also is means for Vairagya. So Abhyasa Sadhana, Vairagya Sadhana is Yoga Sadhana. Abhyasa Sadhana has to be identified in your whatever yogic practices. Vairagya Sadhana must be identified in whatever yogic practices you carry out. Then you will be able to have, with that scrutiny, you will be able to embark upon right sadhana mentioned, right upaya for which you are qualified. You should not be going for unqualified upaya. A child which is 6-7 years old, you should not give the child to read the book of higher secondary. That's not right. Expecting that the child should grow faster, develop quicker. It should commensurate with the abilities, qualifications. So don't look at someone, he's doing like that, let me do like this. She is doing like this, let me do like this. We should commensurate with your qualifications, your inbuilt qualifications, your potentials that you have. So for Abhyasa Sadhana, Vairagya Sadhana, you need to have this kind of investigation, self-inquiry, what do I qualify, not what I want. And therefore the upaya, there is mathematics in upaya, there is mathematics in Vairagya. When you go overboard in Vairagya, many times it happens, people go for such a strong restraint and at some point in time there is explosion. You suppress your tendencies, and at some point in time then it explodes. And not only you come to ground zero, you go below zero. Do you follow? So there's a mathematics in upaya, mathematics in samvega. So understand this also. So there are several degrees of upaya and samvega mentioned by Vyasa. Mrudu upaya, mrudu madhya tivra samvega, madhyam upaya, mrudu madhya tivra samvega, adhimatra upaya, mrudu madhya adhimatra samvega. 9 there. And of course we should understand what is our sadhana, whatever we practice, we must deem that we are mrudu sadhakas. Don't try to overestimate saying that I am adhimatra sadhaka. Always consider wherever you are that this is mrudu sadhana, mrudu upaya, mrudu samvega. Then you will be able to imagine what is madhyam sadhana, what is adhimatra sadhana. And mrudu samveg, madhyam samveg, adhimatra samveg. Wherever you are and we are and I am, we should consider that I am adhering to mrudu upaya and mrudu samvega. Then we will be able to take mathematical steps. But if you think you are adhimatra upaya and adhimatra upaya, you are very sincere, dedicated, and you are adhering to adhimatra upaya, adhimatra tripura samveg, then you will never get mathematics properly. It will definitely go wrong. Now, if the intensities and the means are very, very, very high, naturally it means it is difficult. Adhimatra upaya, adhimatra samveg, definitely means it is very, 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 very difficult. We don't want shortcuts which are hard cuts. We want shortcuts which are sweet cuts. Is that right? Will you like to have a shortcut which is the hard cut? No, shortcut should be sweet cut. If the shortcut is not sweet cut, you will not like to go take a sweet cut. If it is very, very hard cut, then you will definitely not opt for it. Now, literally comes an option, or. What is alternative to Adimatra Upaya, Adimatratama Upaya, Adimatratama Sambega, Adimatratama Tivra Sambega, and then or. It's not alternative. If I say from here you can walk to Europe via Middle East, walking a distance of 6,500 miles, going through the deserts of Middle East, etc. Or there is a direct flight from here to London, 9 hours. Is it an alternative? Not at all. It's not an alternative. Going on the terrain, taking some months and going through all hardships that you get in the Middle East, extreme temperatures, deserts, because that's the road. That's how the road is to Europe. On the other hand, a direct flight, non-stop, 9 hours, it's not an option. Yes, you can walk to London, or you can go by auto rickshaw to London, or you can take a car and go to London, or you can take a flight to London. These are not alternatives. You will never think of going by auto rickshaw. Is that right? It's not an option. Mathematics must be understood here. Why he is bringing Ishvara Pranidhana here? Without you citing the mathematics of it, then going to Ishvara Pranidhana is not proper. So over to mathematician.
Yeah. So back to the question. So if the reader is in awe with this path and the category, so again the question is, Kim etasmadeva asannatamaha. Is this the only way by which it is closest at hand? Okay. Is there any other way? Bhavati kashchid anyaha upaya nava iti. So that is the question. Is there or is there not? That is the question. And then comes the answer in the form of the sutra that says, Ishvara pranidhanad va. Okay. So it's very fascinating in the sense that where it comes in the flow of the sutras, and it is in some sense completely unexpected, because this entity of Ishvara was never mentioned, never touched upon. We have looked at the Chitta, we have looked at Purusha, we have looked at Samadhi and so on, and we are in that context. And out of the blue comes this sutra that says Ishvara pranidhanat va. Okay. Now what is this? Let's understand the sutra itself. So Ishvarasya pranidhanam, Ishvara pranidhanam. What is Ishvara? We don't know. Okay, because so far we have not seen. This is the first time we are seeing that word. So what is Ishvara? We'll see it in the subsequent sutras, because the Sutrakara himself recognizes that there is a need to explain what is this Ishvara. Okay, so that will come later. What is pranidhana? So pranidhana, as Vyasa also says, is bhakti visheshaha. So what does that mean? Bhakti visheshaha, as in bhakti is a well-known concept. It is a class of say class of feelings or class of activities and so on. A specific out of the class is called a vishesha, a bhakti vishesha. Right? Like a dog is a pashu vishesha. Among the animals, there is a specific animal called a dog. So bhakti vishesha is a type of bhakti. Then it says sarva kriyanam tatrarpanam. Okay, so all the activities. What kind of activities? Manasa, vachika, kayika, and so on. So things to do with the mind, speech, body, and so on. Sarva kriyanam tatrarpanam. Okay, means offering. Where? Tatra, to the Ishvara. Okay, so that is pranidhana. So in the pranidhana, of course, it depends. The tatra means wherever you are doing pranidhana. If it is a guru pranidhana, it is offering to the guru and so on. In this context, it is Ishvara pranidhana. And if you recollect, like I said in the previous session, it's also interesting that the verb root dha for pranidhana, it is the same verb root for samadhi. It is the same verb root for dharana. It is the same verb root for shraddha. So all of these words are coming from the same root, the verb root that is coming in.
That is dharana. Dharana, there is dha. Dhyana, there is dha. Samadhi, there is dha. Shraddha, there is dha. So that's an important root. Ishvara pranidhana, again dha. So he'll explain you the dha dhatu and the words which include dha. See, this has also gone into English. Stha. Stha is again for sthiti. Again there is dha there. There, in English, state, statics, establishment. Wherever there is that steady, kind of thing, even in English, it has gone. State, statics, establishment. So that's interesting observation that you should carry out. How the concept of single letter dhatus in Sanskrit have great importance and great purport. So here is dha.
Yeah, so the root is dha, and the meaning in the dhatu part is dharane poshane. Okay, so to sort of hold and nourish. And from that, sam plus a plus dha gives samadhi. Shrat means it's related to satya. So shrat dha is shraddha, and so on. And pranidhana is pra plus ni plus dha. Okay, so now what is happening in pranidhana is sarva kriyanam tatra arpanam, the offering. Now this also reminds us of the shloka in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna says, Yad karoshi yad ashnasi yad juhoshi dadasi yat yad tapasyasi kaunteya tat kurushva madarpanam. So when he says tat kurushva means he is saying do it. Okay, whatever you are doing, whatever you are eating, whatever you are offering in a homa or a yajna, whatever tapas you are doing, all of that, offer it to me. Okay, that is the injunction. So that is the sarva kriyanam tatrarpanam, which is sort of pervades a lot of these ancient texts, whether it's a sutra text, whether it's the Bhagavad Gita and the shlokas there, and so on. So now Vyasa explains what happens with this pranidhana. Okay, so now we have an idea of what is pranidhana. We still don't know what is Ishvara. Of course, we have an idea of what is Ishvara. But Ishvara pranidhanat va. So va is the alternative for what? It is not necessarily an alternative to Shraddha, Virya and all of that. It is an alternative to make the asampragnata samadhi asannatamaha, to make it closest at hand. So it is not a complete bypass where you don't need Shraddha, you don't need Virya and so on. It is an alternative to make it closer at hand. Without Ishvara pranidhana, it will not be closest at hand. With Ishvara pranidhana, it can be closer in attainment. Okay. So now Vyasa says, pranidhanat bhakti visheshat avarjitaha Ishvaraha. So the Ishvara, through pranidhana, having been pleased or having been invoked, okay, and pleased, Ishvaraha tam anugrunnati. So he graces the yogi. Okay. Tam anugrunnati abhidhyana matrena. So it's like ichha matrena. Merely by thought or by sankalpa or by his wish, by the mere wish of the Ishvara, having been pleased by pranidhana, he graces the yogi. Okay, so that is the process. Tad abhidhyana matradapi. So through this grace also, yoginaha asannatamaha bhavati. For the yogi, it becomes closest at hand. What? Samadhi labhaha samadhi phalam cha bhavati iti. So it gets closest at hand and he gets the labha, which is the benefit, and the phala, the fruit of the asampragnata samadhi. So that is all there is in the commentary. So suddenly there are a lot of things happening here. So one path of talking about Purusha, and so basically the abstract philosophical path that we have been going through, there has been a sudden turn by bringing the Ishvara pranidhana, okay, to get the samadhi closer. Then Vyasa has quickly described the process. of how it works. So it is the grace of the Ishvara having been pleased through pranidhana that makes it closest at hand. Okay? And then he describes what is closest, which is a repetition of what has been told earlier. It is samadhi labha and samadhi phalam. So I also wanted to bring up some of the discussions in Bhagavad Gita around this aspect, mainly because they are very sort of beautiful. So it will be nice to read and hear. So one is in the 11th chapter, where Arjuna, when he is talking to Krishna, and 11th chapter is where the Vishwarupa Darshana is happening. There he uses the word pranidhana in a very nice way. He says, Tasmat pranamya pranidhaya kayam. So having bowed to you and having offered the body. Prasadaye tvam ahamisha medyam. Piteva putrasya sakheva sakyuhu. Like a father to the son or a friend to his friend. Priya priyayarhasi deva sodum. So please bear with me, please take care of me like a father to the son, like a friend to a friend, like a lover to a beloved. Okay? And for that purpose, I bow to you and pranidhaya kayam, I offer the body. So that is what is being covered there. The other thing I got, there is a series of shlokas in the 12th chapter, which probably some of you are very familiar with already. So, and I bring it here because here there is this turn from the abstract philosophical entities so far to Ishvara Pranidhana, which is a Bhakti Vishesha. So it's something of a different type. So in the 12th chapter, as most of you know, Arjuna asks, Evam satata yuktaye bhaktastvam paryupasate yechapyaksharam avyaktam tesham ke yoga vittamaha. So there is a question, he says, to Krishna. So these bhaktas or the yogis and so on, the people pray to you as sort of the God embodiment. And there are others who pray to the akshara avyakta, the unmanifest, the permanent, the imperishable and so on, the abstract philosophical entities. Out of these two, Ke Yogavit Tamaha. Now Yogavit means, who, in some sense, it is who are the ones who are most knowledgeable of yoga, who have attained yoga. Okay? And Yogavit Tamaha is the most, just like we had Asanna Tamaha, for whom it is closest. So let's say who are the most, according to you, who are the most in the higher, farther in the path of yoga? So that is the question. Now Krishna in several shlokas, he gives a very beautiful answer. He says, Maya veshya mano ye mam nitya yukta upasate shraddhaya pareyopapetas teme yukta tamamataha. So those who have completely given their mind is established in me. Okay? Nitya yukta upasate, who upasanas, let's say prayers, okay, but they are forever have established their mind in me and offered prayers to me through Shraddha. So I'm mentioning this because all of these concepts have been coming in the Yoga Sutras until now. And in Bhagavad Gita, they sort of come together in a very nice way in the context of the Avyakta Akshara Purusha and sort of the philosophical entities. In some interpretation, the Avyakta also refers to the Pradhana Prakriti. Okay? And the Lord, the Ishvara, Krishna and so on. So then Krishna gives a clear answer. Those who sort of pray to me, they are yuktatama mataha, as per me. Now on the other hand, yetu aksharam anirdeshyam avyaktam paryupasate sarvatra gam achintyam cha kutastam achalam dhruvam sanniyam yendriya gramam sarvatra samabuddhayah te prapnuvanti mameva sarvabhuta hite rataha. So the people who are praying to the abstract philosophical entity which is unchanging, permanent, unmanifest, cannot be described, which can go anywhere, which doesn't move, which cannot be thought about, and so on. How? Sanniyamya indriya gramam, by complete control of their indriyas, of their organs. Sarvatra samabuddhayaha, having the same state of mind everywhere, which means there is no dvandva, there is no anger, heat, cold, pain, pleasure, nothing is there. For these people also, te prapnuvanti maameva. So in the end, what they attain is me. So the goal, in the end, the attainment is the same in both cases. Sarvabhuta hiterataha, the ones who are sort of benefiting the entire humanity or the entire creation. However, he says, klesho adhikataras tesham. Again, this has a link to what we are seeing. Klesha means difficulty. Okay, klesho adhikataras tesham avyakta sakta chetasam. The ones who are attached to the unmanifest abstract entity, for them the difficulty is more. Why? Avyakta hi gatir dukkham dehavadbhir avapyate. So that goal, the abstract, philosophical, unmanifest, undescribable goal, is difficult to the people with bodies, like creatures like us. Okay, it is much easier to have a bhakti towards a entity like sort of a god figure, like this. Ye tu sarvani karmani mai sanyasya matparaha. Now again, why is this relevant? Because this is talking about pranidhana. Because we said sarvakriyanam tatrarpanam. That is how we defined pranidhana. Offering all the actions there. Right? So the same thing is being said here. Ye tu sarvani karmani. All actions. Mai sanyasya matparaha. They have completely surrendered that to me. They are always thinking about me. Ananye naiva yogena. By okay, let me complete. Ananye naiva yogena mam dhyayanta upasate. So now they are sort of doing dhyana about me. Dhyana, incidentally, is a slightly different verb root. It's a dhyai. But they have a form of yoga where they are not involved in anything else. And they are sort of meditating on me and offering all the actions to me. Tesham aham samuddharta. Okay, so I will elevate their status. Mritya samsara sagarat. Elevate from where? From this samsara made up of samsara sagara. So it is like an ocean, this ocean of creation made, which is a mortal plane. Mritya samsara sagara. Bhavami nachirat partha. Very soon I will be maya veshita chetasam. So very soon I will raise them from this mritya samsara sagara. So again, this is a direct link, because in Yoga Sutras we are talking about asannatamaha, very close at hand. In Bhagavad Gita it says bhavami nachirat partha, very soon I will do it. Okay, so again there is a direct link, and he is saying tesham aham samuddharta. For them I am the one who will elevate. Vyasa is saying the same thing, right? When you have invoked or pleased the Ishvara through pranidhana, saha tam yoginam anugrunnati, right? He gives the grace. So the same thing is being talked about here. Mayeva mana adatsva mai buddhim niveshaya nivasishyasi mayeva ata urdham na samshayah. So this is a continuation. He is saying, let the mind be established in me, may the buddhi be established in me, and so on. Atha chittam samadhatum. See, now this is again a direct link to the Yoga Sutras. So now we are talking about chitta. Atha chittam samadhatum. Samadhatum means in order to come to a state of samadhi. What? The chitta. As we have discussed, the samadhi is of the chitta. Right? It is not of the purusha, and so on. So atha chittam samadhatum na shaknoshi mai sthiram abhyasa yogena tato Mam ichhaptum dhananjaya. So without this, it is not easy. You will not be able to get the samadhi of the chitta. Right? So again, the same train of thought which introduced Ishvara Pranidhana in the sequence of Yoga Sutras is coming here in a different way, but the same thing is being said. Now, all the notions, the technical terms that we covered in the Yoga Sutras, like Abhyasa, Pranidhana, Yoga, Chitta, Shraddha, and so on, are coming here. So now the Abhyasa Yogena has come in the Bhagavad Gita at this stage. So, Abhyase api asamarthosi matkarma paramo bhava. Okay, so now this is again, the discussion is of a similar kind. Oh, this is very difficult, what can I do? This is very difficult, what can I do? So here it is saying, Abhyase api asamarthosi. If that kind of Abhyasa, what? The one that gives sthiti, which is again an elevated certain state of the mind. If you are not capable of that, mat karma paramo bhava, do your actions for me, offer your actions to me. Madartham api karmani kurvan siddhim avapsyasi. So if you offer all your actions to me, through that also you will get the attainment that you wish for through the Abhyasa Yoga. Athaitat api ashaktosi. If this is also not possible, okay, so this is a train that is saying, okay, this is very difficult, now what to do? Okay, this is also very difficult, now what to do? Atadetat api ashaktosi kartum madyogamashritah sarva karma phalatyagam tatak kuru yatatmavan. So initially he said, all actions are for me. So whatever you do, it is for the Ishvara. Okay, suppose if that is also difficult, because you are in the business of life, you have to do other things for, let's say, earning money and everything else. Then sarva karma phalatyagam, which means the fruit of all the action, that you sort of surrender that to me. And then yatatmavan. So be completely, yata is in some sense similar to abhyasa, it is about effort. And be completely established in that path, right? So in Bhagavad Gita, the same discussion is happening in a slightly different way, but it is still covering a lot of the technical aspects that were there in the Yoga Sutra and the Vyasa Bhashya. And therefore, often it is said that before you start Yoga Sutra, you should be aware of Bhagavad Gita. But at the same time, after you have studied Yoga Sutra, you can go back to Bhagavad Gita, and there you will recognize a lot of the deeper levels, the deeper insights that are not available in the first reading of the Gita. Because now you understand what Abhyasa means, where Ishvara Pranidhana comes. And once, because of that understanding, there is a much deeper appreciation of the poetic form in which the same technical concepts have been brought about in the Gita, which has been a very academic discussion in the Sutra and the Bhashya. Okay. All right. So now, like I said, this Ishvara term has come out of the blue. There is no context, no definition, right? And even in the, let's say, the Sankhya context, we have been talking about Purusha and Prakriti, right? And Satkaryavada and things of that type. So immediately, the question Vyasa puts is, Atha Pradhana Purusha Vyatiriktaha. So, okay, so he says, after we have read the sutra, Ishvara Pranidhanatva, he says, okay, wait. So, Pradhana Purusha Vyatiriktaha, other than the Pradhana, which is the initial state, the unevolved state of the Prakriti, right? Other than the Pradhana, other than the Purusha, Ko ayam Ishvaraha nameti, who is this thing called Ishvara? Okay, so that is the question that comes. So it's also very fascinating on how this term of Ishvara, because in this day and age, in this context, we take that notion of God and so on, being present in these subjects and topics as taken for granted. But that is not how this is. This is a very sort of an academic exercise. They are being very careful and very diligent in how this is being laid out. So Vyasa asks, okay, I know Pradhana, I know Purusha, who is this Ishvara? And that is where the next sutra defines or describes, characterizes what Ishvara is or who Ishvara is. Klesha karma vipaka shayaihi aparamrishtaha purusha visheshaha Ishvaraha. Okay, so that is the definition. This has a very big commentary, so we won't be able to finish the commentary in today's session. Okay, so let's understand the sutra. So, klesha, karma, vipaka, ashaya, these four things. Now that gets combined into a compound word called the iterator dvandva samasa. So it becomes klesha, karma, vipaka, ashayaihi. By this, okay, by these four things, aparamrishtaha, untouched, uninfluenced by any of these. Purusha Visheshaha, a specific Purusha. Okay, so just like I gave the example, so Bhakti Visheshaha, a specific type of Bhakti. Pashu Visheshaha, so a specific type of animal, a dog, cow is a Pashu Visheshaha. So here, Purusha Visheshaha, a specific Purusha entity is Ishvaraha. So that is what is being explained. So which specific Purusha out of the multitude of Purushas? The one who is untouched by klesha, karma, vipaka and ashaya. Okay. Now we'll have to see what those things mean. And that will come in the beginning of the commentary for this sutra. What is klesha, what is karma, what is vipaka, and what is ashaya. The thing to remember at this point is Ishvara is that specific Purusha entity, so which is very much within the class of Purushas, but still is special because he has been untouched by these four things. That is what the sutra says.
You see, the philosophical convention is, if a definition is given, don't just look at the definition what is said. You also have to consider what is not said. This is the philosophical kind of convention. That if something is defined, don't just go by definition that this is what is this. This is what is said and this is this. You also have to make an exercise to consider what is not said. So what is not said plus what is said is the essence of definition, is proper perspective to understand definition. So usually the popular notion is that the God is being defined. Patanjali defines God. No, that's not right. The God is not being defined. This is not God. What Patanjali is defining is not God. Because the sutra, alternative sutras, we have to imagine what alternative sutras could have been there. Klesha karma vipaka ashayir aparamrushtaha ishvaraha. He has not said it. He has brought Purusha Visheshaha. Or he could have said Klesha karma vipaka ashayir aparamrushtaha Purusha Visheshaha. Purusha Visheshaha Ishvaraha, Purusha Visheshaha Bhagavan, Purusha Visheshaha Brahma. These alternatives are not opted for. So the God is not being defined. Most of the English renditions have considered that this is God. The God is not being defined. This is not God. He has used the word Ishvara. He has not used even the word Bhagavan. Bhagavan, Bhaga. Some point in time we will explain you. Bhaga are 6 qualities of exalted, unexceedable range, unexceedable degree. Bhaga, Jnana, Vairagya, Aishwarya, Samarthya, etc. So one who has unexceedable degree of Jnana, Vairagya, Aishwarya, Bala, Samarthya, he is Bhagavan. One. That's the suffix. Bhaga. Vishnu Puran defines what is Bhaga. And these are the qualities. If someone is having it, it's called Bhagavan. Like one who having lot of dhana, we say Dhanavan. Somebody having lot of strength, we say Balavan. So one is a suffix to Bhaga. He is not defining Bhagavan. He is defining Ishvara. Even Bhagavad Gita, of course we will not go into that detail today. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna in one place says, Sarvasacham mrudisannivishtaha mattaha smritirjnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvaihi aham eva vedyo vedantakrit vedavid eva cha aham. In the 15th chapter, 15th verse, he says, I reside in the heart of all. And for me ensue certain glories. What are human glories? Knowledge, memory, wisdom, etc., etc. That is characteristic of a human being. We are not strong physical manifestations, because there are stronger physical manifestations than us, such as elephant, such as eagle, such as dinosaurs. A human being stands out for certain faculties of the mind and psyche. And he says, I give all that. So Bhagavan is there for us to give glory in Jnana. Bhagavan is there for us to give glory in Vairagya, Aishwarya, Samarthya, Bala, because that is what Bhagavan is. He has that, and therefore he can share that. So he says, I reside in the heart of all in the 15th chapter. And again, and in the 18th chapter again he says, he doesn't say first person singular, I reside. He says, Ishvara resides in the heart of all. 18th chapter, 61 or 60th or 61 verse. Ishvara sarva bhutanam vruddeshe arjuna tishtati. He doesn't say I reside. He says Ishvara resides. Ishvara resides in the heart of all. Brahmayan sarva bhutani yantra rudhani mayaya. Moves the beings in the world as if mounted on a machine of time and space and karma phala. Goes on moving them on the wheel of it. Tameva sharanam gaccha sarvabhavena prabharata tat prasadat parashanti sthanam prapsasi shashvata. Surrender unto him and you will get the supreme abode, supreme peace, supreme attainment. Tameva sharanam gaccha. Surrender unto him. He doesn't dare say surrender unto me. He says surrender unto him. And you will get the ultimate spiritual samam bonam. So Ishvara is a word which has also come in Bhagavad Gita. Who is the Redeemer? Ishvara is the one who gives the final spiritual samam bonam. Bhagavan is the one who gives you all glories required in this world and the other worlds. So that's why the Ishvara is an entity. It is not God. Because the God is giving all this. All this is given by God. And the worship is not to that God for you to attain asamprajna samadhi and kaivalya and moksha. The divinity aspect within you is called Ishvara. The divinity within you has not created mountains and oceans and planets and stars and galaxies. It is for you. What does that Ishvara do? Brahmayan sarva bhutani yantarudhani mayaya, and then also gives you parampada, parashanti, paramashanti, paramapada. He is the one who gives you what you get in life. He is the one who gives you what is spiritual samambonam, moksha, kaivalya, nirvana. He is not the one who has created mountains and rivers and planets and stars and galaxies. It is the God who has created. Therefore, this is not definition of God. This is definition of Ishvara as an entity. It's a metaphysical entity. That aspect of that Supreme who is within you. The same God is all pervasive. But that which gets into the space within your heart, Ishvara sarva bhutana bhruddeshe arjuna tishtati, who is in that container of heart, is the Ishvara. See, do you mean to say there is no water in the atmosphere? There is water in the atmosphere. But will it quench your thirst? No. The water has to come in a glass. Then it will quench your thirst. If somebody gives that water in the bucket, you don't drink it. Somebody gives you water in the bucket. Although it is drinking worthy, yet you hesitate. Oh, this is in bucket. This is for bath. Should I drink it? But if I give you even impure water in a glass, you will without hesitation consume it. Water getting into the container is so important. For you to without hesitation and consider that this is for drinking. If I give you in a bowl, you will not consume it. You will not quench your thirst. If I give you in a bucket, you will not take it for quenching your thirst. If I give you in a glass, you will quench it. So the divine, that aspect of the great supreme, which is within the heart, becomes that important. Like water in the glass is important for you to drink. It is water also available in the atmosphere. But that water will not quench your thirst. Water's element is all pervasive here. There is moisture in the atmosphere. So there is water in some form. But that form of water is not going to quench your thirst. So Ishvara who is within the heart, that divinity which is in the heart gives you emancipation. That divinity which created mountains and rivers and planets and stars and everything around us is not going to give you liberation. Water all over is not going to quench the thirst. Water in the glass is going to quench the thirst. That aspect of Supreme, which is all pervasive everywhere, is not going to give you liberation and asaprajna samadhi and liberation. That which is with the heart is going to give asaprajna samadhi and the fruit of it, liberation. Therefore, Ishvara sarva bhutanam vruddeshe arjuna tishtati. Vruddesha, in the region of the heart, which is the locus of the chitta. So that's why Ishvara is the term worth deliberating on it.
And in the context of Pranidhana, Guruji also talks about explains Pranidhana by saying surrendering everything to Ishvara. But then he makes a very specific point which applies to practitioners like us and which will also remind us of what was sort of very important to him. And he used to repeat it often. He says, through surrender, the aspirant's ego is effaced. Right? And that is something Guruji really used to look for. Right? So the effacing of the ego is the thing that he points out as the key for what? So the aspirant's ego is effaced and the grace of the Lord pours down upon him like torrential rain. Right? So that is something to understand and bear in mind. So he does talk about surrendering actions and pleasures and everything else. But as a result, for people at, let's say, our level, it is you have to look for the ego being effaced. Okay? And then what happens is the grace of the Lord pours down upon him like torrential rain. So that's how he has described that part.
This giving up or going away or fading out or evaporation of the ego is very important for the very act of offering something. You cannot be holding on to ego and do certain acts. Okay, I surrender unto you. It's a ego bloated act, ego bloated mindset. You cannot be surrendering like that. How do you surrender? What is the expression of it? What is the manifestation of it? What is the tone of it? What is the frame given to it? And that's why ahankara, lopa is so important to be surrendering. That's the first step that has to come in. You can't be clinging onto your ego and still say, I am surrendering, I am offering. Okay, I offer to you, take it. Is it offering? No. What is the culture of offering? What is the culture of surrendering? And therefore Guruji brought that factor. Ahankara vilopa is so important. If the ahankara is not diminished, you cannot be having such an act of sarva karma phala tyaga, sarva karma tyaga, sarva tyaga. But with the tyaga, renunciation will not come. Surrender will not come. That's a basic component which Guruji has pointed out. Okay?
Yeah. So we'll recite the slokas on Guruji. And after that, maybe last time there was one question which we had not answered. We can quickly touch upon that also. And after the slokas, those who want to leave can leave. Others could stay for that question. Vaijñānikah shikshakatve kalākāra āsaneshu yaha yogābhyāse ca tattvajñās tam vande sundaram gurum yoga vruksho lokesmin vardhito yasya preranaya Yogacāryāya gurave Sundarāya namo namaha. Okay. So I think last time I had mentioned in the context of Shraddha, I had mentioned a line about what Guruji has said. He had said, trust is instinctive and faith is intuitional. And the request was to elaborate that a little bit in terms of what Guruji meant to say there. And I said, okay, let's wait for him to come back and we can together we could give an answer.
See, Shraddha or the faith and trust don't go by literal meanings. There are certain words you just can't go by literal meanings. They have enormous shades of meanings, and we will be getting such a word here now in Ishvara Pranidhana. It is to love Ishvara, love divinity. Pranidhana has to take place with profound love. For your convenience, for our convenience, let's say God. We must love God to be worshipping God, loving God, to be offering to God. So, the word love, you will never get the proper meaning of the word love. You open out any dictionary. Why? Because it has several shades of meanings. I have a friend, I love my friend. What's the love? I have a friend, I love my friend. So what is the manifestation of love for a friend? What is the manifestation of a love for one's own offspring? What is the manifestation of love in relationships or conditions such as friend, boyfriend, friend, girlfriend? What is the love? Love for parents. What is the love? Love for children. What is the love? Love for revered ones. What is the love? Is the love not changing? Love for beloved. Husband's love for wife and vice versa. Father's love for son and vice versa. Brother's love for brother and vice versa. Brother's love for sister and vice versa. Love for friend and vice versa. Which is the meaning of the love? Tell me now. Which is the meaning of the love? Whether you love your friend, that is a love, or whether you love your parent, that's a love. Is it one and the same love? Love changes. The shade of love changes. Which is the real meaning of love? Tell me. You can't give a meaning of the love whereby other loves are excluded. Now you can't give the meaning at all. Otherwise you can say which is love. You will say the mother loving the child is love. If you exclude all other loves, it's not proper. Similarly, the faith, trust, the meaning will be derived with reference to context. Where is the faith and where is the trust? Say that, therefore, Guruji said, tell me now, between a baby, child, and the mother, whether the child has faith in mother or trust in mother, whether the baby trusts the mother or the baby has faith in the mother. Many times the baby shows that it has no faith, yet it trusts. Many times the baby shows that it has trust in mother but no faith. Or it can happen. So it depends upon between which two things we are bringing the faith and trust. Then the meaning will be arrived at. Now, the baby has trust in mother. How is the trust instilled? It is by birth. The moment the baby becomes the baby of the mother, the baby develops something by birth, by instinct. So the trust is instinctive. When will the faith come to the baby in mother? Baby is 3 days old, 10 days old, 15 days old, 1 month, 2 months. When will the faith come? So faith will come at some later point in time. However, the trust is there. So these two words, don't try to take literal meanings in front of you and have a thought process taking into consideration the lexicographic meaning of it, and then try to understand what is trust and what is faith. So these are the words where there is no specific particularized meaning to the words. Between A and B, between relationship, it will decide whether it is trust or whether it is faith. So you will not have lexicographic solution to the concepts and notions about the word trust and faith. But this is an example where Guruji said it is instinctive, because the child has it. The moment it is born, there is a trust relationship based on trust between mother and the child. So mother will have faith in the child. But this child is now 40 years old and unscrupulous. Is it possible the mother still says, I trust you, I have faith in you? So the manifestation has now changed. Now this offspring has become 40 years old and really not trustworthy even to the mother. Mother will not trust. So it all depends upon the scenario, time and space and all those things, situations, according to which the meaning has to be derived. It's not literal meaning that you can give to these words. Another word is love. Look into my book on Discourses on Yoga, Bhakti Yoga chapter. There are 4 chapters on Bhakti Yoga, Discourses on Yoga. The word love has been used so much that it has lost all shape. It has lost all the shapes. It has lost all specificities. Everything we call it love. I can say I love you to different people for different purposes in different framework, in different relationships. I can love a friend. I can love my parents. I can love a revered one. So the meaning of the love is inflexible. Very flexible. It's not an inflexible term, very flexible term. It depends upon reference to context, situations in life. You can say A person can trust B person, but in different scenarios. So emergency, having a calamity, A will trust B. To what extent, in what respect, in what perspective? That doesn't mean that A will be trusting the B in a very perspective. There is a calamity, problem, calamity. And therefore somebody says, I will trust you, please do this. That doesn't mean he will trust that person everywhere, anytime, all the time. It is only a frame. In that frame, you will trust a person. So also there is a faith. The faith is similar aspect. Because these are two subjectivistic words. Lot of emotional aspect and subjectivistic aspects are there. Therefore, they do not have inflexible meanings. They are flexible. They are very flexible meanings. Similarly, is the case of trust and faith. So, with reference to context, try to derive its meaning. Okay. Hope I have clarified. If not, better luck next time.
Yeah, or the alternative is to stick to the word Shraddha, which has been already clarified. Rachetasaha samprasadaha And like I said, in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it says, Kasminnu Shraddha Pratishtite iti. Where is this Shraddha established? Hridaya iti yuvacha. Okay. So Guruji is now, given that you have to explain in English, he has to give different shades of meaning to arrive at an conceptualization of what Shraddha is about. Okay, thank you. So, yeah.